We've got a fantastic session lined up for you under the title Life in a Day, which looks at an area of documentary and filmmaking practice that's relatively new, principally web-enabled, and of course brought about by the whole concept of crowdsourcing culture. This project's a hugely innovative piece of work by a gentleman who has already a fantastic track record in both documentary and drama filmmaking. One Day in September, Touch in the Void, Last King of Scotland. So can I welcome to the stage Kevin Macdonald. Good to see you. And joining us, and joining us as well for this project, and one of the drivers and creative forces behind it. Let's hear it for Joe Walker. Joe. Good to see you. Now, let's get started. Here's a good one, right from the very off. We've talked about innovation, we've talked about crowdsourcing, we've talked about documentary film production making. I first met Kevin Macdonald when he was a young man working in that most reviled of formats, the reality format show, when he was at Scottish television as an 18-year-old, I think it was, which was actually not quite, but it was one of a pioneering show actually in many respects, because what it sought to do was look at the lives of real people in real time, something that Channel 4's been experimenting with recently with 7 Days. But tonight we're here to talk about life in a day. Let's just start with the first and most obvious question. Where did the idea come from? What triggered it?
Well, it wasn't my idea initially. It was Liza Marshall, who used to be at Channel 4 as head of drama, I think she was, who's now with Ridley Scott's company, Scott Free, and she had met somebody from YouTube who said that they wanted to do some sort of film to mark their 5th anniversary, because this year was the 5th anniversary. It's amazing to think that it's only 5 years since they've been going, but the 5th anniversary of YouTube. And so she came to me and said, you know, what can we do? Let's try and do something. And we came up with this idea, and it was partly inspired, it was inspired by two different things, the way we approached it. One was the mass observation movement that Tom Harrison and Humphrey Jennings, who's a documentary filmmaker who I really admire, started in the 1930s, where they got people around the country to take part in a kind of anthropological project of writing diaries of their day once a month or once every 2 weeks, or answering questions about what do you have on your...
I think you have to contact switchboard.
I've got to contact switchboard. Yeah. Okay, I'll do that after. And so they would ask people questions like, you know, what have you got on your mantelpiece? What do you have in your pockets? Which is one of the questions we've stolen actually in the film. And we thought that would be an interesting thing to do that with digital cameras.
Yeah.
That was one thing. The other thing was there's a Russian film by I think his name Nikita Mikhalkov, who did Burnt by the Sun. He did a documentary about 15 years ago called Anna 6-18. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I do actually. Yes.
And that was a similar sort of thing, because you were asking questions of his daughter as she grew up from age of 6 to 18, obviously, and intercutting those questions. You know, on every birthday she would answer the same questions, and you'd see the change in her. And you'd intercut that with archives showing the change in the Soviet Union becoming Russia, etc. So those were the two sort of influences. Yeah. And we thought we can combine those two ideas. And so we launched the project at the end of June, and 24th of July was the day chosen to do the filming. The idea was one single day, whatever you film has to be in that day. Film your life, something interesting that's going on in your life, and answer some of these questions. And we've got 81,000 clips or something.
4,500 hours.
4,500 hours, and he's looked at it all, so yeah. He is a hero. He's a hero of documentary.
A fantastic shooting ratio. Yes. So tell me a little bit about the collation and the gathering and that sense of actually getting all of that material. What were the mechanisms by which you did that?
We had to really invent it because it doesn't exist, and I don't think the scale of this is, there's nothing you can take off the shelf. So the first thing we did was went to a lot of excellent recent film graduates of NFTS and London Film School, particularly London Film School because of the multi-language element of it. There are so many languages spoken that we thought we had a likely list of languages that would be spoken. We hired I think at one stage we had 24 people all in a sort of sweatshop.
All in a room sort of half the size of this floor. Apple Macs. There's a few of them here.
Thank God they got on well, I mean, another inch less and it would have been, adultery. But basically we set up a computer system. Everything was downloaded from YouTube. We had a set in motion, just a technical aspect that we'd go back to people for original rushes so that we could change things. And then we set up a rating system, developing a piece of software in order to basically, for them to sort of search through and try and find the kind of strong characters, strong stories, visually strong images, and collate them in a way that we could search for them. So we're still doing that.
They did a star system, sort of 1 star to 5 stars.
5 star, yeah. And you were looking at the things that were top.
I essentially Joe looked at an awful lot of it. I looked at really only 4 and 5 stars and some 3 stars that he thought were good. And I don't know, I watched a couple of 100 hours or something.
Yeah.
And but then the other thing about the system that we used, this sort of database system, was that we were able to search for keywords. So, for instance, we've got a sort of montage near the beginning of the film where people brushing their teeth, for instance, and you could look up teeth brushing, and you'd get 2,000 teeth brushing from 56 different countries around the world, and that sort of demonstrated the power of it. And obviously the temptation then was to make a film that's all just montage, sort of showing this is what's happening in the Gobi Desert and this is what's happening in Angola.
So you could have made choices in terms of the way in which you approached it. On the one hand, you could have gone down the route of the remarkable and the significant. In other words, choosing a day with a very big, strong significance in the world, a kind of day in the calendar, a day in the Christian or Muslim festival, a 9/11 day, a day like that, rich with significance, or to actually choose a day that's to some extent got less significance. Were you going for the extraordinary or the ordinary?
The ordinary. Yeah. Introversion was what I wanted. I wanted people to tell me about themselves, and that was really the purpose of choosing, just another day. It's a Saturday, and all the sort of publicity we did around the film, encouraging people to take part, was about be honest about your life. Tell us what your life is really like. Don't glamorize. Don't dress things up. But of course, inevitably, being a documentary, you're looking for the moments of drama, the unexpected moments of drama that happen. But which come out of ordinariness. So, for instance, springs to mind one of, because there are literally so many thousands of clips floating around. I dream of all these different clips, but the one that springs to mind is of somebody filming their wife having a baby, and she's having a cesarean. It's in Italy somewhere, and filming the wife having a cesarean, and then the camera starts like this, and then he collapses on the floor, and then a little moment of chaos ensues, and the camera is picked up by a doctor who starts filming the wife again, and then the camera pans over to the husband, who's got his legs in the air like this, being held up, and it's the ordinariness, but it's what documentary's all about.
Now I wonder, just from the small bits that you've told us so far, the idea of teeth brushing, of that, was one of your ambitions to go through, if you like, the arc of a day, the 24 hours of people are waking and then going to bed at night again? Is that a framing device in the film?
I mean, lots of trends sort of spoke to us through the rushes. I mean, there's invisible trends all over the place. There seemed to be an unusual amount of watermelons, for example. But there was also another added benefit. I mean, I think they chose 24th of July because of 24/7 and because the World Cup was finished. And it was a Saturday, so obviously we got lots and lots of weddings and very many typical things for everybody of a Saturday. Gardening, lunch, family, those kind of things. So there are sort of trends that we just had to watch the rushes and find them, but also it was gloriously a full moon that day, so it's sort of, a lot of people were staring at the moon, and a lot of people used time lapse, so a sense of passing days seems like a natural kind of framework
for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was wondering also, it's the case as well that whilst your ambitions were to recruit as many people from different cultures as you could, it's a film or an idea that's cast within, if you like, this one, if you like, an Anglo-American mindset or perspective.
I don't think that's quite true, actually.
Is it
because
not?
I don't think,
No.
no, I don't think it's an Anglo-American perspective. I think it's a YouTube perspective, I think, is
Yeah.
the worry. And that actually, surprisingly, is, yes, it's very American, and we got far more American clips than we got anywhere else, but actually got surprisingly few British ones.
clips, yeah.
And we got an awful lot from Brazil, Argentina, Germany, Ukraine. Ukraine comes out top almost for the quality of its clips, and a fantastic amount of great things that we've got from the Ukraine. The big problem was, how to represent the rest of the world in a way that wasn't just tourist shots, and so we tried to do that by handing out cameras. We had an aid organisation that helped us sort of get cameras out to various different parts of the developing world. I think something like 50 different countries, about 300 cameras went out.
No, it's 470.
Oh, 400.
Yeah.
See, he knows really what happened.
We had this. I know this
You've
well
looked
because
at the budget, haven't you? That's like 470
we had this
cameras.
lunatic day when we went into a leading camera shop. We only had a day, and we went in and said, "Look, what's the best camera and what's the cheapest camera, and how many can you give us for 45,000?" Which was, they were looking around thinking it was going to be an episode of The Apprentice, and that's why I know the figure.
Okay, so we had all these cameras and we sent them out, but I think that's where we were flawed in our approach. And if we were to do something like this again, we would do it differently, because I think what you realize, you send a camera out to Vietnam or to Africa, East Africa. So a lot of cameras seem to go to Tanzania and Uganda and places. And we sent a sheet with them, and they went with somebody from an organization who was meant to explain to people how to use them and what we wanted. But of course, because the whole concept of filming your own life, of making a documentary at all, of having sort of the spare time in a way to think about these sort of questions that we wanted to be answered, I think was so alien that actually we didn't get as much good material out of that as we would have liked to.
Yeah.
And there were often the cases where, the kind of classic developing world television, which is, a slightly crooked talking head in the news, sort of with a raffia mat behind or whatever. And there's a lot of things that are framed like that, where people have got a camera and they've framed somebody in close-up, and then just in the background you see some incredible thing going on, all this colour and life, and you want to think, please just film that. And then they'd be filming this close-up of a person answering rather dutifully these questions, and then that would be it. But that was our fault for not really thinking it through. But we did still get enough. We got some wonderful stuff from Afghanistan in particular, some great material from there.
How important for you, given that the concept of YouTube, often quality in terms of the buffering of the image, the whatever, you can't always be guaranteed of the kind of quality of what you're going to look at in a clip or whatever. How important was visual look, or if you like, the kind of aesthetic style and of the clips, or were you looking for that to be very random and just user-generated, if you like?
Well, I think we should watch a clip, actually. But just to, we said when we were sort of asking people to take part, we said, do it on the best possible quality camera you can.
Yeah.
And then if you're selected, if we like your rushes, then we'll come back to you.
Yeah.
And we'll email you and say, please send us, send your FedEx number, please send us your rushes. And that's what we've been doing. But we also said that if something really if your film is really extraordinary, it can be shot on a terrible old telephone, and we'll still properly use it. And we have done that. We've used some stuff which is part of its appeal is the kind of rawness and the roughness and the kind of almost abstract quality of the imagery. One that springs to mind that we've used is a clip of a crowd, very disturbing clip of a crowd in Brazil beating up a man who's just stolen something. And they think he's stolen some money off somebody, and he's hiding the money in his mouth, and they're just beating him up. And it's filmed on somebody's camera phone. And you can see 3 other camera phones all filming it at the same time.
Yeah.
And so it's become this kind of spectacle. Yeah. And part of the communication of that is the fact that it's on this terrible camera phone. But
We should have a look at a clip. You're right. Could you set up the first clip for us, a Joe or a Kevin, whoever?
Well, I was going to say that I know we just agreed before that we wouldn't show this longer clip.
Yeah.
But I wondered, if we've got an hour and a half, maybe we should show them, because
Okay.
it's sort of, then we almost don't need to show anything else if we don't have time, because...
Yeah, because this is about, the first clip we're going to see therefore is about 10 minutes in length, is that right? About, yeah.
The
and
opening.
It's the opening of the film, so it sets up the concept of the film, and that's probably longer than a clip that we would normally show, but let's take a look at it in its entirety to get a real flavour for
Just
Life
to give
in a
you
Day.
just a little bit of background on it. So we're only in an assembly stage of this cut, so we shouldn't really be showing anything. It's a long way off, and so it's very rough. You'll see the varying images, the quality of the images, and that sort of thing. Just temp music, but also one of the things we're probably going to do is to put somewhere on the screen where every clip is from, because it's one of the questions that everybody always asks. Oh, where's that? Where's that? And of course, that's part of the concept, is the global nature of it. So just to set up, we haven't put that, didn't have time to put the countries on it. And so it's this whole beginning, you'll see a lot of different moons shot in different places. I think they're from New Zealand, Angola, Vietnam, America, Germany, or something like that. That's and just to give you a sense of the sort of breadth of the film. Anyway.
Okay, well, let's take a look at the first clip, Life in a Day.
That was 1,000 people breathing.
Can you speak English?
Yes.
What?
Oh.
What the day is it?
Yes, I like to move it.
Oh, what the day it is, you know?
This is best day of my life.
No, I'm asking.
What the day?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. The stupid question. What the day is it? I don't know. Wait. Sorry.
Okay.
24 July.
and what the day it is?
It's the best day ever.
You might be wondering why I am up at this ungodly hour. Like others, I believe that the time between 3 a.m. and 4 p.m. is one where the veil between this world and the next is the thinnest. Often during this time of the day, I hear the sound of my name uttered by an unseen presence.
Good morning.
Kenapa ketawa?
Tahu.
Dat was mooi.
And here we go into the garage.
That's right. We're going to ride the elevator. All right, let's ride it. Here it is. That's right, this is the elevator at the Market Parking Garage in Roanoke, Virginia. This elevator has been made famous right here. Here we go.
Takes to rebel. So I know how to use this shit. I know how to use my weapons. You feel me? I know how to flex my muscle. So this is a night in the life of S. Gray, man. You know what I'm saying? Sleeping on the couch. You know, but grinding my ass off every day. Shawty's not enjoying their mother, man not enjoying his wife or his woman, his lady. Just bullshit, man. Alpha male, trapped in and locked in through religion and politics. Cause society's all fucked up. The reason I can't just move on with my life, cause society's fucked up as we know it. So soon enough, man, my plans will all come into perfection.
Fantastic, thank you. One of the things immediately to think is, as you're watching it, there's kind of so many different kind of fragments. It's like memories of different films you've seen over the years, or moments from the history of documentary or whatever. Were you looking for it to be as stylistically kind of complex as that, in as much as there are so many different kind of moods and tones and whatever?
Well, I mean, I think we weren't looking for it to be anything. I mean, we were just sort of accepting what we were given, in a sense. So obviously, then we started to watch it. We started to see, you know, how the material could speak to us. And obviously, you can imagine the struggle has been and continues to be how to cohere it. Yeah. I had all these things that are so stylistically different and shot by so many different people and have so many tones. And obviously, music is massively important, and particularly in this opening section. And obviously, later on, it becomes much more talky and much less music-driven, but the opening is very musically driven. The music can cohere things, and Joe's been fantastic at selecting music, actually, so far to do that. But that's been the battle, I think, is to find structure and find cohesiveness and find some sort of narrative, some sort of narrative momentum. And I think, for me, it's surprising how little narrative you do need to keep going, and almost the chronology is almost enough. Just watching it there, I was sort of struck by the fact that, because literally, other than Joe and I are the first people to see this, we've just literally been cutting it. We're not even...
I changed it this morning.
Yes, I know. I thought, that's a new shot. I haven't seen that shot. I was struck by how much I did want to know where all these places were, because that is sort of part of the fascination, isn't it?
It's really fascinating.
And so, that means we definitely have to put on the words.
I think you kind of want to know that's the Ukraine, that's Gambia, that you know, whatever it is. I'm just wondering now, it's an obvious question and probably one that's not easily answered. Does the approach and the journey that you've embarked on fundamentally change notions of authorship? Traditionally, within a single camera documentary with a producer-director, there's no ambiguity as to who the author is. It's someone who's selecting shots and choosing and all the rest of it. This actually, to some extent, challenges the very notion of authorship, even although you two guys are still driving creative forces within it, and you select shots, select music, and all the rest of it. There's so many different hands in there. You saw people lighting a candle, and the candle helping light a shot, and you know, all sorts of different styles of filming and photography there. So what does it do to the notion of authorship?
Any question with this may be hard to answer. It's my way. I don't know. I mean, Kevin said a very interesting thing to me when we started, which was not to try and make a path through the jungle with a machete, but just to sort of, you know, go gently through it and allow the material to speak to us in some way. I don't think that answers the question, though. I think it's more all-embracing attitude, and we're, to be honest, still struggling with how we're going to navigate our way through the material. But there's a very, you know, there's a lot of promise.
I think that it is something that I've thought about a bit. I mean, I think on all documentaries I've done, I always feel that the editor is the person that is kind of co-creating it with you, and the whole idea of, certainly in the way I work, that the sort of that it's my vision in the film. I don't believe, actually. I mean, I think it's often is the editor and the director working together, and hopefully together creating something. And I think in this case even more so than ever. But also there is it's a collaboration with all, I don't know how many people there are so far, I think it's 550, because we're going to, basically the credits are going to go directed by me, and then 550 people.
Down the side,
So, everyone gets a co-directing credit, basically, whose film is in there. And I think, but it is very interesting. I mean, it's kind of like we're orchestrating something.
Yes.
We've been given these different bits of melody, and we're orchestrating.
There's a great variety in the clips that we've got. I mean, some things are literally... We did at one stage ask people just to send us unedited material as best as possible. But of course, there are lots of filmmakers out there who gave us, maybe the next clip we should show is an example of that, which, sort of an amazing, perfect short film, which we've had to do nothing to.
And literally almost drop it in somewhere.
Yeah, there are several of those, and there's several films where we watched them and thought, wow, that's a perfect short.
We're not showing it, but there's an amazing example of that. Was two guys in Russia, the parkour, sort of the jumping from building to building, and it sort of starts in the afternoon when they wake up, and then they sort of go around Moscow getting into trouble and jumping over the turnstiles in the metro, and it ends with them on a roof having dinner, you know, and
shoplifting their lunch or their dinner and then going and sitting on a roof and eating it. And it's kind of like something that Jean Vigo would make. It's kind of a perfect kind of film about sort of being a naughty teenager.
Yeah. Now, I was going to ask you also, staying with some of the kind of classic kind of things of kind of documentary, and you touched on this, is that all documentaries, to a greater or lesser extent, are narratives that have some kind of arc of narrative in the life of the central characters or whatever. In this case, we're seeing glimpses of all sorts of different little narratives that are building up to a bigger kind of sense of the life in a day, our lives in a day. Is there a temptation for you to want to stay with characters longer than you should, or you become fascinated by someone, maybe the drunk guy on the bench, or the woman who's clearly just given birth to her child and is compelled to keep looking at the child? You know, these are already interesting characters, aren't they?
Well, I mean, you know, we were sort of saying at the early stages of compiling the thing, it was like looking around a load of rubble and saying we've got to make, you know, Salisbury Cathedral somehow out of it, and occasionally you see a buttress, you know, you think, oh, wow, and that was always a sort of repeatability of a character, and there are characters that we introduced at the beginning. The Indonesian maid is a good example.
Yes, the woman in Indonesia who goes to the market, she's a maid, and you see her then go to the house where she works, and her first job is to bless the house. It's the full moon festival or something. And so her first job is to go around blessing with holy water all the things in the house. So she does the bicycle, she does the microwave, she does the printer in the office, and then there's the guy who combs his hair and goes to the mosque, who's in Dubai, is an Indian gardener in Dubai, and so we follow him through his day of going, you know, gardening and missing his family and going to the beach and looking out to India. And so, yeah, already in that there are certain characters who we wanted. We thought that's a way of sort of making you be pulled through the film and providing a narrative that these key characters. But then there are people like the woman who's breastfeeding, and that's just one little shot. Yeah. You know, and there's in amongst probably, I don't know, 20 minutes of sort of all over the place, and then there's like one beautiful moment. And I think that's what I've appreciated so much about doing this, and I've absolutely loved about it, is just the beauty of the everyday and finding those little magical moments that speak on a kind of lyrical, poetic, metaphorical sense above just being kind of, you know, documents of somebody's ordinary life, and that somehow raise the significance of the piece.
Now, guys, this is a bit of an unfair question, but I guess I really
be unfair if you like.
Be unfair, right? I'll ask it.
Be as challenging.
No. It's more kind of unfair because in a way you've not completed the project, so it's difficult to know kind of where it goes next. But I mean, there would be two schools of thought. One of which is to say that this is if you like, the cave drawings of a new genre of making crowdsourcing documentary, of making, and we've seen great pieces of music that have been crafted through, you know, orchestral scores and whatever that have been done in this way. So at one level it could be a new genre of crowdsourced culture, or on the other hand, merely a kind of fad of social media, as it were.
I think this is pretty sui generis. I think the reassuring thing for everyone in this room, who I assume most people are kind of involved in the film and television business, is that your jobs are safe. Yeah. Because most people cannot make a film to save their lives, and that's the sort of that's the thing that I took great comfort from. The reality is that, you know, we've got 3 great hours, but we had to look at almost 5,000 hours to get there. Yeah. And I can't see many other ways in which you could use this kind of process except to make films like this. And how many films like this, or, you know, there was a variance on this idea. But I think you know, we've been quoting a lot since Joe and I started talking about this, the end of the Apocalypse Now film that Francis Coppola was made about Francis Coppola, where he talks about digital technology and how it's going to liberate people, liberate filmmakers, and that, he says right now there's some fat little girl in Oklahoma who's got a camcorder and she's going to be the Mozart of cinema because she's able to use this to experiment. Well, it ain't happened. And I think that's really interesting. I think that the digital technology has enabled a few interesting films to come about. Probably not any more than 16mm technology did. So I think, and this sounds kind of arrogant, but I think we're the filmmakers. And I think that these people are providing us. They're providing us with rushes. And they're the cinematographers, but they're not the director or the producer in the sense. And that's the relationship, I think, really.
Joe, have you any thoughts on that as you're making it? Do you feel that you're at the beginning of crafting, as it were, a new era in documentary, or is it opportunistic around the YouTube moment, as it were?
Well, I mean, when I started, endless people sent me things that they thought might be helpful, and they were always sort of multi-screen things that were very elaborate concoctions, and it was like, I don't know, maybe we're maybe the first to avoid doing that with this material, because people always seem to put it together in a particular way that stamps it as a YouTube film, and I think we're trying to get something more meaningful out of the material than that. I mean, I would observe that there's a lot of stuff that seems to work beautifully well on this kind of handheld format. I mean, the colours in particular. I think sound is behind video very much. But I also think that, there's something about the film. There's a difference between people showing you things, personal things, where there's nobody else in the room observing it. And I find that feels like there's a long future tense in that.
Did you notice that 5 people who's clearly the rushes have not made the final cut and just walked out?
Left,
Did you notice that? Whatever. You can't please some of the people. Joe, you were just about to also mention another clip that you thought it might be worth us having a look at.
Do you think we should look at Slim Up?
Yeah.
This was originally called Slim Up, but we spent ages trying to find a really good translation which actually made sense, and we decided to call it Climb Up Skinny. Which doesn't really help, but it's just an idea. We thought we'd give you a...
This is one of the examples of a real filmmaker who has made a film, and which, there were a handful that we got that were really just beautifully crafted films by filmmakers, and this is one of those.
So this is a short film made by a filmmaker that you sourced and that you're going to put in its full form.
Pretty much. I think we can cut it down a little bit,
Okay, let's take a look at Slim Up.
Atrapada chorizo. Casco. A ver, Wabi. Vineta Yamun.
Vineta Yamun, Virginia, som-hi, va, a poc a poc. Vineta Yamun, Virginia, la fe. Genoll, peu, dreta, molt bé, Virginia, perfecte. Poc a poc.
Vineta Yamun.
So in the case of that piece, was it just simply something that arrived randomly in the post or on YouTube, as it were, or were you? Was this part of your coaxing of filmmakers to go out and make to the
No,
brief,
this is
as it were?
completely randomly. After sort of looking through stuff for about 3 weeks or something, this one came up. Every day, the kind of the people who were logging the material, 23 people or so who spoke all these different languages, who were going through looking at this material, would pick a favourite of what they'd seen that day, and then we'd watch the favourites, and this was this one that came up like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a little masterpiece as a piece of filmmaking, and she's like this incredibly charming character, and it's got suspense and surprise, and it's everything.
We tried to keep the idea of rushes viewing, you know, that idea that you'd have dailies. And it's partly a way of getting 23 or 4 people to think the same way about clips and to recognise.
Yeah. So in lots of ways you were trying to put some kind of organising logic into the process that to some extent came close to a process you already knew, which was waiting for the rushes of the day to arrive or whatever. Yeah.
We actually, I was going to say earlier, we had actually 6 stars, because there was 6 stars was so bad it's good.
Yes.
Which is, there was a huge amount of those. Yeah. But yeah, no, it's just trying to work out how do you know, we're going to have the time to watch the very best clips, and how do we, there was an awful lot of stuff in the middle area. There was a lot of stuff that was easily dismissible.
So I mean, the collaboration, I suppose, we talk about what we didn't say earlier about the collaboration, you know, the 500 directors and all of that, is that every single person who was then part of the selecting process was also making value judgments, which were then, I think, reflected in the final film in some way. So it really is collaborative filmmaking
in that wider sense. And presumably there are also some little gems and masterpieces that have never made it to the process.
That have never made it to the process, and that, you know, every now and again, you know, I'll go looking for something and then find something else and say, why was this only given 2 stars? God, this is brilliant. In fact, there's one of those that maybe we could show, which is something I came across just a few weeks ago, which was a shot which somebody had looked at. It was from an Afghan user, so somebody who'd been given one of our cameras, and it just looks like a shot of traffic. Yeah. And then something so extraordinary happens, and it becomes a sort of, because we were trying to deal with how to deal with.
Is it available? Could we?
Yeah, so I think is it called
Afghan? I think Afghan Street.
Afghan. Maybe. Have you got that somewhere near being queued up?
So this is the raw shot. It's about 2 minutes long. It's got the wrong title on it. Don't worry about it.
Well, let's have a look at it. It's called Afghan, and if we could find it, we could have a look at it.
Is it called Afghan?
Too much pressure on you.
It's got the wrong title on the front, so they should just play it. It's fine. I think I put the wrong title on the front. So
the wrong title on the front, no?
So go into the one that says Afghan, and it maybe says Climb Up Skinny on it.
By mistake.
By mistake.
Yeah. I tell you what we'd like to do now is if we could turn the lights on, I wouldn't mind if our audience could start to think of some questions for Joe and Kevin And if you could wait until the microphones come to you, we've got some volunteers here with the mics, and one volunteer with the mic, so 2 volunteers with the mics, right? Okay. So who's going to lead off, please? And don't be really shy. You've got to wave your hands around because we've got a lot of bright lights. Yeah. First question. There.
Hello, hi, Jo Rowling. I was just wondering about, you talk about collaborative filmmaking. I was wondering how you were planning to distribute the film. Will you be sending copies of the finished film to all 500 directors so that they can show it? Have you got that far?
No, currently the plan is that it's going to show in a kind of experimental section at Sundance, and then when it's showing at Sundance at the same time, it'll be available on YouTube for an hour and a half, and then it'll be distributed sort of in some way theatrically in various territories around the world for about a month, and then it'll be available on YouTube. Yeah. So it's a kind of combination of kind of limited, the art house theatrical and internet.
Interesting. Yes. Any further questions here? Yeah, gentleman right there. Yeah.
I sent in a film about a Jamaican gardener who is a very happy man, but he's being harassed because he's growing tropical vegetables and using too much water. That was shortlisted.
I remember that.
To be honest, I thought it was actually the best piece of the law. And to be honest, I think Kevin really needs to get a life. If it doesn't find its way in the film, I think you've got a case.
Well, what I was going to ask was, I've just been across the road. They're showing Humphrey Jennings' film in the art exhibition at the Millennium Gallery, and the mass observation films were all about really about looking at other people, about looking at the community and everyday life, but a lot of the films that I've seen on YouTube have all been very self-centered. I mean, did you find that when you were going through them, that they didn't seem to be looking at the rest of the world? I mean, not the ones that you've used.
Something used to happen to the researchers at the end of a long day, especially where their sort of total was meant to be, when up to speed was 200 clips a day, which is, a huge amount of footage to look at. And it was akin to being a psychotherapist at the end of a long day, people whining, whinging, moaning, complaining. And that is a huge bulk of stuff. And very striking that sort of introspection, I think, is a very first world thing.
But you're right. I mean, YouTube has created a kind of phenomenon of performance, of self-aggrandizement, of showing out and all of that sort of stuff, which at one level is almost the opposite of the kind of observational tradition that you're talking about in Jennings or whatever. So any other questions, please? Yes, there's a woman right at the middle there. In fact, I know her very well. How are you? Life good? Yeah, good.
Hi, I just wondered, Karen, if you could talk a bit about the questions that you asked people and how you might incorporate them in the finished film, whether that's become less important now you've seen the clips, or is that still part of the structure?
It's probably become less important because I think there was more good material than maybe we were expecting, and I think more emotional material, which is because people are letting you so much into their lives, and I guess it's the flip side of what this gentleman here was saying. That there is the side of that which is people being very egocentric, but there's also the side of that which is people allowing you to be a part of something that's very private, and some of that is very emotional, and I think so the questions are less important, but they're incorporated into the film, and the questions that we asked people were, what do you have in your pockets? So mostly it's the obvious things, cell phones, money, that kind of thing. But then there's knives, guns, what else? Weird stuff. I don't know, sort of ferrets, glasses of whiskey, all sorts of stuff, and then
flags of Canada.
Yes, and then the other question was what makes you laugh, which had the least interesting responses. Probably a bad question. We shouldn't have asked. I think because
jokes.
Because mostly say things that are funny, or jokes, or when somebody falls off their bicycle, I laugh. So that was the least successful in terms of provoking interesting responses. What do you love is interesting. Mostly, of course, it becomes focused down on, when it's not kind of frivolous things, it focuses down on your loved ones, family and friends, children. And then the most fertile was what do you fear? And that was fascinating. And kind of when we watched the cut of that the other day, I almost had a sort of panic attack because it's just every horrible thing that can happen to you is sort of in there. But it all sort of comes down to, oblivion, death. It's basically it. People are afraid of death in many different ways. But I think the thing that's thematically, I think, so interesting with the film is that it just highlights what are the fundamentals of human life. It is about birth and children and love and sex, illness and death. Basically, that's what everything is about in the film.
Would you leave the questions in on screen as a framing device, or are they? You're just using them as a mechanism for gathering material?
No, we occasionally just use them, within the context of the film. But at the moment we have sections which are in various different parts of the film, which are, love, fear, happiness, possessions.
Any other questions from the audience? There's one there and there's one there. And there's one down there.
Hiya. I was really interested in this question of authorship, and I wondered, as a director, how do you see the role differing from when you make your own films, as in like filming your own films on a set versus this? Is it more of a curatorial thing, or do you see like your own stamp on it as a style?
I think it is more of a curatorial thing. I mean, I think we're giving shape to it and finding the story, which is sort of half of, I guess, directing and editing. But I think the other half of it, which is, the script writing, as it were, the providing of the material and the visual beauty of it is all provided by them. So it is a genuine collaboration. And I think one of the things is, I don't know if anyone else felt this watching that opening, but I think there's just some very beautiful imagery, and the whole film is just filled with that. It's extraordinarily beautiful. And so I think I see it as a collaboration.
So it's more curatorial than directed, you think, than the authored sense?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, there's a question right at the back of the stairs. Yeah, up there. Thank you.
It's kind of a comment to which I'd be interested in your response on the business of putting the countries or the nations or the states or whatever on screen, because I mean, it seems to me, watching the long first clip, that what you're doing in a way goes back to the very roots of cinema, like two shots cut together. Mm-hmm. And going right back to that, you're actually creating relationships between people, which are, if you like, in a non-formal way, reminding us of a common humanity and a common experience.
That's the purpose of the film.
And that the countries, unity, I think, could be a really superficial disruption of both the cinematic process.
I think that's exactly what we're battling with, because in one hand, it uses a different part of the brain when you sort of read these things, but it does satisfy also a curiosity, and it's something I find myself when I watch it. I do think I want to know where that's from. So yeah, there are two different things. There are two different things battling it out there, and we'll see which one comes out.
Or maybe there could be, I mean, you know those group shots you see sometimes of like, the 30 people who worked for Richard Nixon, and down the bottom there's a key with who they were.
Yeah.
But you can actually just look at them all and say, all these people worked for Richard Nixon, or whatever, and maybe a key would be a great thing to kind of go back, and maybe it would actually...
That's asking quite a lot of the viewers, though, isn't it? Yeah. There's 500 clips.
Well, it gets to YouTube.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, when you asked that question, just stay with the mic. When you asked that question, your first question, not the second, were you asking it with a degree of skepticism, or what? I wasn't sure of the tone of what you were asking.
No, I mean, I think the pitfall is sentimentality. The risk is a sentimentality about our common humanity, but I think it's a risk really worth taking.
I think there's exactly. I mean, that's the very areas that we spend a lot of time discussing, and I think the the film is not sentimental. If anything, I'm worried that it's somewhat depressing. Because the most powerful emotional elements in it are about people who are going through difficult times in their lives. And, it's much easier to be interesting about hard times and pain and trauma than it is to be interesting about happiness. And so that's actually the worry. But we've always been conscious of the fact that it shouldn't be a kind of Coca-Cola, we are the world sort of film, but that is obviously a pitfall, potential pitfall.
As the commissioners, if you like, do YouTube have a value system? If something has been made by Film 4 or BBC 4 or whatever, they would come at things with values, with principles, with the desire to have something either because it was for a particular type of audience or whatever. Did YouTube come with a set of values of what they thought it should be?
Not at all, and that's been one of the things that's been really interesting, because we've been so liberated. We have there's no kind of commercial imperative on the film. It doesn't have to make back money. It doesn't have to please a wide audience. I said to them at the beginning, I don't think this is a film that's going to be for everybody. It's an art house film.
Yeah.
And if you're happy with that, then let's do it. But you have to know that it's always going to be slightly esoteric, I suppose.
Yeah.
And they've got contractually no editorial input at all. The only thing that we're concerned may happen is some legal input, because obviously one of the complex issues with this sort of film is clearances.
Yeah.
So everybody who filmed effectively had to sort of click on a couple of buttons to say, yes, we allow our image to be used.
Yeah.
But then further than that, when they send in their rushes, we ask them to actually sign a bit of paper. But of course, there are lots of people in the background. There are lots of people. There are lots of imagery of branding or whatever. And so that's the area that was it's the elephant in the room with YouTube. We're not quite sure.
Yeah.
We're not quite sure what a line they're going to take on that. So.
Yeah. And it's one of those things that you can never be certain, even in films that you're wholly controlling, that the provenance of the images and things like that. And it can be hugely difficult with people sending things in that actually they didn't film, or people sending in things of people whose permission they'd never sought, etc., etc. And of course, people's lives over time change, and they think, well, that sounded like a bit of fun then, but it doesn't now in my life,
Exactly. And I think that's something that we've been aware of since the beginning, that just from the simple things of simple aspect of people filming on the wrong day. People filmed something maybe a year before or the day before even, and my attitude has been, well, if I don't know, it doesn't matter. But often, people will send things in, and then we've actually got quite excited about seeing something, and then we notice some incongruities, notice the newspaper, and you think that didn't happen on that day, or there was one particular one that actually had the date on the end, but we'd never just got to the sort of black bit at the end, and it had the date filmed in, July 24th, 1999 or something like that. So that's been frustrating. But yeah, I mean, I think that's a hugely complex area.
Yeah. Now, in fact, sorry, because I did actually reduce you to the role there of mic carrier, but of course you are also someone that wants to ask a question. My apologies.
Thank you. I just have a general directing question for Kevin. How difficult was it, and what was the process of going from making documentaries to going into feature films?
Well, it sort of happened, I wouldn't say accidentally, but it happened in a way that wasn't planned for me. I was a total documentary advocate who kind of, pitied fiction filmmakers, and then I made Touching the Void, which there was no other way to make it other than to have dramatization, or I couldn't think of another way of making it without dramatization. So I battled with that for a long time. Is that, should I do that? Should a documentary have dramatization? And then did the film and found that actually I enjoyed that side of it, and I enjoyed the kind of the craft of that. And then because Touching the Void was successful, I was, asked by somebody, producer, would you like to make a fiction film? And I thought, in the spirit of adventure, well, shouldn't say no. Yeah, of course. And so and actually, I found that I really enjoyed it. It's a whole different set of muscles in a way. There's many similarities, but there's also many differences between the two. And I've made 3 feature films in a row. We're 1 documentary sort of in between them, but I made 2 feature films in a row over the last 3 years, and I really felt like, God, I really want to go back into documentary. So I'm doing this documentary and then hopefully another documentary after it. And I'm really enjoying it so much, and sort of forgotten even though this is such this is not really a normal documentary at all, but just the pleasure of watching real people and the oddity of real life and allowing the sort of breath of reality into something is just, I find really stimulating.
So, Kevin, this is the Sheffield Documentary Festival. It's almost the House of Scientology of the documentary movement. Do you regret betraying it to move into fiction?
No.
Well, we'll take another. There's a gentleman there, second row. Yeah, thank you.
If anyone wants to see another clip, and we have got other clips, but I don't know how much time we've got.
We've got exactly 20 minutes. Okay. So we could.
Would anyone like to see more?
Yes.
Would you like to see another couple of clips? Yeah. Okay. Well, what we're going to do is take 2 more questions, then go to another couple of clips, and then sum up. There's a question from this gentleman, and then a question with the woman in the
or would you
red
rather
top.
just show drums?
Yeah, sorry.
I don't want to interrupt.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I can imagine E&O would be a nightmare on this. The question I've got is copyright. So if this is a huge smash success, where does the copyright lie? Do all those 500 people get a piece?
If it's a huge hit, where does the copyright lie? Another
that's a naughty question. I mean, I think that, I'm not the one to answer that. I'm not the producer, so I don't really know. But from what I understand and the discussions that I've been a part of, I think that, first of all, it's actually been a very expensive film to make because of the number of people who've had to be employed translating and logging and the technological aspect of it. It's actually been quite expensive. So the chances of it actually recouping its money are pretty slim. But let's say it did. I think at the moment, because it's such a difficult issue to resolve, I think the feeling at the moment is that any profits would go to charity. But that's the idea. But I think it's probably only a conceptual problem, luckily.
One worth discussing. There's a woman there in the red top, pink top.
I've only seen a couple of clips, but they reminded me of a film called Koyaanisqatsi, which I haven't seen for a long time, and I can't remember how it was filmed. I think it was just one person went around collecting stuff. Do you know that film, and have you got any comments about that? I just remember it from the back of my mind, seeing all these beautiful images of humanity.
That's Godfrey Reggio, who's a cameraman turned director, I think. And it was one of the films that we talked about early on, because I think the opening is probably a little misleading because it's very music driven, and perhaps the rest of this film isn't really quite so much like that. But it is a brilliant film. I think it's shot on Super 35 or something, wasn't it? So, but they had a way of structuring things, and there's that sort of eureka moment about sort of half an hour in where you meet the first person. You're only looking at Utah or something for about half an hour, and it's almost like a bone in the air kind of moment. But no, we talked about it, and with appreciation, also that one way of thinking. My background is in music; it's not in documentary at all. I've got no documentary experience whatsoever, and I'm still wondering why I got the job. But it was to think slightly musically in terms of it was almost thinking in terms of symphonic structure, and that was complete music and images only. I think the first sounds you hear in Koyaanisqatsi are half an hour in as well. But when we had our first briefing with the researchers, we actually played a 10-minute.
We showed some clips of different films, and that was one of the ones we showed to sort of give a sense to the researchers of what we're looking for. But it's largely the film is large. The Koyaanisqatsi is largely stop motion, and or time lapse. And so deliberately we've tried to kind of avoid. Other than I think there was one sort of sunrise shot, a couple of sunrise shots there that are time lapse. We sort of avoided that for that very reason of kind of we don't want to be too much Koyaanisqatsi.
There is, but at the same time, that mass observational thing means that people have got iLapse on their iPhones and they're using that. So it's very much of the moment that people are doing that kind of photography. So I don't think we can avoid it without, feel like censorship of something that people are really happy to play with. And it has provided us with some great shots. But one's conscious of the fact that you're in a similar area to that very great film.
Good. Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, guys, I wonder if you could set up the next clip for us.
So we've just been having an argument about what the next clip should be, or the last clip should be. I don't know if it's the last one, but we're going. Joe won as usual, and we're going to show this is Joe's baby.
Can I just ask you that when you said Joe won as usual? I mean, one of the things about filmmakers when they come to festivals is they do like to create the idea that it's all been perfectly harmonious and all the rest of it. Has it? I mean, you guys like
Kevin
each
gives
other?
me the illusion that I've got some control, which is sort of,
So was that sleight of hand, Joe, when he was saying, yeah, Joe won, first time he's ever fucking won, and he won't be winning again? Yeah.
I know that there's going to be something to pay for.
More or less, yeah. Okay. No, so this is you tell.
This is the very first thing I cut. I mean, I actually spent 2 months just viewing material and doing this research process, and I thought after a while, my God, I've got to cut something. And what I'd noticed early on, I mentioned earlier watermelons. Another trend I kept seeing is an awful lot of people who are filming themselves playing kit drums.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I could actually cut together the world's largest drum solo.
Yeah. Good idea. Why not? Well, let's take a look at the next clip.
Guten Morgen, Vera. Ich glaube, du musst aufstehen.
Ja.
done. Thank you. Guys, thank you very much indeed. One final question, Kevin. Just remind us, what's the theatric aspiration? You go Sundance in January?
Sundance in January, and then it's not sorted out yet, but what we're hoping to do is to, I think, the 5 or 6 territories which supplied the most clips, to have some kind of limited theatrical release, which is still being worked out how to do that. But basically, there's only a 6-week window to do that.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think the truth is, I think it'll be much better on the big screen, this film, than it will be on the tiny YouTube window. So I'm pushing to try and get as long a theatrical exposure as possible.
Yeah, great. And now, of course, it seems perverse for me to ask this because I said earlier we're at the beginning of potentially a new mechanism for filmmaking through crowdsourcing and social media and whatever. So were this the beginnings of the journey of a new era of crowdsourced documentary media, what are the do's and don'ts? Just to summarise, as I know that people like to hear, quick checklist of what would you do differently or what would you never do again?
Well, I think Joe probably knows, can be more specific about it than I can. But as I said before, the idea of making it truly representative of the whole world, I think we failed in that in some degree, and I would do that differently. And other than that, it's really a lot of technical questions. I mean, we haven't had very long to cut it. But Joe, you can go into all the sort of technical things that have been tricky.
Just on technical thing, we've got 60 different frame rates that we all have to make one.
Yeah.
So it's been very hard to unify that because
I mean, who knew there were 60 different frame rates? It's kind of amazing.
Not a clue, no. I mean, that is, so basically the technicality of it, but you also hinted also the logistics of it, the simple way in which it had to be coordinated.
We didn't really figure out, that of course all of those people that use material you want to use, you have to get in touch with them, you have to harass them until they send you the material, and then you get them to sign a release form, and then all of that is a huge amount of manpower that we didn't really figure out. The amount of translation, all the different languages that are very hard, hard to find people who can speak them in London.
We've got a song sung by some Angolan women, which has got 3 languages in it. So that clip alone has taken, a week just,
to make
just
sense
find
of
out
the
what.
And it's all that translation is enormously expensive as well. So, so that side of it has been difficult.
Yeah. So the answer, I think, to your question is the only people that are going to get rich is FedEx, I think, because they've been sending stuff all over the world. Look, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming along to the session. Joe Walker, Kevin Macdonald, Life in a Day.
Thank you.